All right, welcome back to the Chase Thomas podcast. Taping this on a Tuesday afternoon. Andy Staples of the Andy Staples Show over on The Athletic, also a college football writer. One of my favorite writers that I've been reading for quite a long time. I won't tell Andy how many years, just not make him feel old or anything, but I've been reading
I
him
am
for.
old. It's okay. I am willing to accept that I am up there in years these days, and it's okay. Yeah, I've learned you're only as old as you feel.
That's true. I mean, I'm 31 now. You don't feel like mentally you feel the exact same, but physically, where there's runs on Rocky Top where you're going uphill and you're like, my knees are not what they used to be, and I have pains now that I did not used to have. That's
See,
what you feel.
this is why, and I lived in Knoxville for 2 years, so
Mm.
I know how that feels. The undulation of the landscape is not great for the runners.
No.
Fortunately, where I live, there is no elevation whatsoever. It is perfectly flat. So my knees thank me every day. But yeah, I would probably have to take up the bike or the elliptical if I were where you are.
I like it. Are you a runner or no?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't run very fast, but I do run, and a lot of it now. I got the Peloton app, and you have the treadmill workouts, but I'll just run outside with those in my ear, and they're telling you when to speed up, slow down, and I like that. It's helped me. I've actually gotten a little faster doing the interval work and the HIIT work and stuff like that, because before I would just kind of plod along for a while and like listen to a podcast, and as much as I would love listening to your show or somebody else's show, it doesn't make you move that fast.
I'm right there with you. I don't listen to anything when I run. Malcolm Gladwell shamed me into that a couple of years ago, reading that stuff, where he's like, if you really love running, you shouldn't need anything else in the outside.
Malcolm Gladwell should listen to some Meek Mill and shut up.
What if he did? What if that's like one of his morning routines? He's just before he heads out to the cafe, he just has dreams and nightmares blasting in the apartment in New York.
He would never ever suggest running without music if he'd ever heard Dreams and Nightmares.
Ooh, there you go. I feel like, I mean, I love it now. I won't lie. It's one of those things where I plan out podcasts while I'm running. I get lost in my own thoughts. So where I'm like, oh, I should hit up Andy this week, or oh, I should do this, and oh, have I reached out to that person? I'm planning a wedding in 2 months, so like I got to think about stuff like that that I still have on my plate.
My wedding planning consisted of this.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Cool. Okay.
Here's the thing, though. Is your now wife a pretty definitive person where it was like she didn't need your real input on the matter to settle some back and forth?
She didn't want my real input.
Oh, okay.
But she would ask, and then I'd say, I like this. And she'd say, no, I think we should do this. I'm like, then why did you ask?
To get you involved, to just feel like
right.
you're a part of the process. Like
exactly.
She was throwing you a bone, but not really. And then you gave an opinion. She wasn't really looking for one. It was just her talking out loud and looking to see if you're paying attention. Well, for me, I'm colorblind, so everything for me is extremely complicated. So she'll, for instance, like we have a Keyshawn and who is sitting right next to us right now, but she has these pills. She's getting older, and I learned yesterday because I told her. She was like, "It's the white pill," and I was like, "What white pill?"
Which
she was like, and she was like, the white pills. And I was like, they're all white. And she's like, no, we have a pink one and a white one. And I was like, no clue. No idea. I'm legally colorblind. So I did the test.
So I am red-green colorblind.
Yeah.
Like in biology class in 9th grade, our teacher was taking they had the sheets where the little numbers are buried in the dots. And that
I'm familiar. Yes.
To test for actual colorblindness. But the red-green is a variation of it, which like I can see red and I can see green. I have no idea if it looks like what everybody else sees, but I see a different number in the dots than everybody else. And my teacher's like, well, there's like 1 out of 85 people or 1 out of 85 males are red-green colorblind. So there's very little chance anybody in this class is. And then when he realizes it's me, he's like showing me all these numbers. He's like, now what about this one? What about that? And like, everybody's staring at me. I'm like, please make this stop. Please go away.
Well, it's one of those things too, where people get mad at you for this thing that you can't control, where if you do the number game with somebody else where they think I'm messing with them, they think I'm being dishonest by telling them like I don't see the number. They're like, "How do
Right.
you not see it? It's right there. It's 13." And you're like, "I
Can't.
would love to be able to see it. I cannot see it. I don't know what to tell you, but my brain does not see it, so I don't know what to do. I can't help you."
Well, but that for the wedding planning, I imagine
Mm,
that you just sort of recuse yourself from
right.
certain decisions.
Well, I don't want to like lead the charge where it's like if I can help settle or like help move forward on certain things, then I'll do that. That's where I'm good stepping in, where I'm like, okay, you're back and forth and that kind of thing, or you need context, need help reaching out to folks, that sort of thing, doing some research. I can do that. But in terms of like theme and picking stuff, and like it's been a struggle with the whole soup thing because I'm like, it's not going to look what it looks like. It's a blue and black look the same to me, so I don't really have a preference on
Yeah.
that matter because it won't even look like what it looks like to everybody else to me.
I do like the navy for the
Yeah.
groom at a wedding. It does look good. Don't feel like you have to stand on ceremony. Let's put it
Yeah.
that way.
Well, I think we're gonna end up I think we're doing a navy blue and then I'm doing a green, like it's a type of green that I've never heard of. It's a green that I can't see, so I will have
Right.
to take your word for it. But it's some sort of green, white, and then brown shoes and brown belt. But yeah, it's a whole thing. Like she got me for my birthday a year and a half ago, colorblind glasses, sunglasses, and it was so thoughtful. It's one of the early signs that this was gonna work,
This is the one. Yes.
right? Yeah, it's a fun time. Andy, as much as we could keep talking about our wedding plans and our choices in weddings, I think folks would like to hear our perspective on some college football stuff. But I want to ask you this as someone who does a show Monday through Friday over on The Athletic, a very good show that everyone should go check out if they have not already done so on theathletic.com. Um, the realignment talk, because for me, I've hesitated to dive too much into it. I read it, I keep up with it. Part of me now wants to just stop reading it and just send
Hmm.
me a text alert when it's all done and then we can move forward because I don't know if I can handle one more alert of like, well, they're talking like the latest one this week is the SEC
Well,
is done at 16 and you're like,
yeah, the
okay.
SEC's not. Read the story though. You read the full
Mm.
story. It's like one athletic director says the SEC presidents don't want to move past 16 unless they decide they do. Like, it doesn't mean anything. The SEC was never going to make the next move anyway. Like, it's
Mm.
not logical. But I will say the realignment stuff on the podcast, people love it.
Yeah.
And people say they don't, but I see the numbers. Like,
Mm.
they listen more to that than anything else.
Even during
And
the year, like during the season?
yeah.
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah. If you could do realignment during the season,
Yeah.
like that, if you had a like, remember, was it when Rutgers and Maryland went to the Big Ten? That was
Mm.
actually during the season. I
Yeah.
remember I was in Eugene for some big Oregon game. I think maybe they were playing Stanford that day,
Mm.
and so that all happened that morning, and it was just like, yeah, that sort of supernova is what
Mm.
everybody would want because you could have your realignment talk and then you could talk about some games
Yeah.
because ultimately that's what we all want the games. We only get them for 3.5 months. That is the blessing and the curse of college football. But realignment does seem to get people just really interested, not necessarily excited, because for fans of certain schools, the results are not good
Mm.
and it's scary. But everybody wants to know, and everybody wants to know what's going to come next or what might happen next. And there's not a lot of definitive information. That's part of the problem with all this is anybody who's actually involved in it is not going to be leaking something until it's about done.
Are you getting like a lot of emails from fans at like Tech, at Georgia Tech, at Oregon State who are just like, are we about to be just where App State was right before they made the jump to the FBS, where it's like we're running the group of five and we're gonna have our own playoff and we're just getting left out of where we're at? Like, is there a lot of fear with a lot of schools that you're
Yes.
learning? Okay.
Yeah, and frustration too, because
Mm,
you've been part of this thing for this long, and now it looks like if you can't be part of the Big Ten of the SEC, then you're not really part of the thing anymore. Now,
mm,
I would argue that if Greg Sankey, if Kevin Warren, if those people are smart, they will find a way to create a postseason where those people are part of it, where they are
hmm,
included. because I think there's more money in that for everybody long term.
March
And
Madness
also,
shows that.
right. And it also doesn't turn all those people off because, listen, if I am a K-State fan or a
Mhm.
Kansas fan or an Oregon State fan, and this round of realignment ends up with my school getting busted down to what I think is an inferior level to what it was, and they have no chance to ever play in the playoff with the teams from the SEC and the Big Ten, I wouldn't want to watch any of their games either.
Hmm.
Like I wouldn't watch Ohio State, Michigan. I wouldn't watch the Iron Bowl.
Mhm.
But if I felt like my team did have a chance, if it had a really good year, if it won its league, that they'd still have a chance to make the playoff, then I absolutely would watch Ohio State, Michigan, and the Iron Bowl because I want to know this is the team my team might play.
Mhm.
Like that's exciting. So you risk turning off a bunch of casual fans who would also be watching your product if you just say we are the only show in town.
What do you think Sankey and Warren would say to that?
I think they might agree with me. I hope they would agree with me. I think they might say, they might say, well, it's not our job to
Mhm.
take care of them. Our job is to take care of our leagues as best we can. And then however else it falls, it falls. But that's why that's why I say I do think the postseason makes more money long term for everybody the other way. The regular
Mhm.
season is going to make a ton of money for the Big Ten and the SEC anyway. I mean, they're going to be so far ahead of everybody else. It's not even going to be a competition.
Mhm.
So it's not like they really even need to worry about, will one of these other schools from some of the other leagues come up and then beat our team for the national title? Probably not going to happen.
Mhm.
Once you get 10, 15 years into this where the economic disparity is that big. But what's wrong with the champion of whatever we're calling, some amalgamation of the Big 12 and the Pac 12? Because it does seem like one either has to take from the other or they got to merge or something like that. And you can kind of create the third conference,
Mhm.
or the ACC would be they'd be the third and the fourth, those two. And let's say you had four auto bids: Big Ten champ, SEC champ, and then the champs of those two conferences. Well, what's wrong with one of their champs being an 11 seed and then beating the 6 seed in a round one game and then playing in a quarterfinal and maybe having a good game and winning that and getting to the semis? And then it's sort of like you mentioned in March Madness. Well,
Mhm.
you get to the Sweet 16 or the Elite Eight. That's when the team with all the money smashes you.
Mhm.
But then everybody had fun watching your run,
Mhm.
and then you get to see the big dogs slug it out. It's a magical formula, and it works.
Yeah. I don't. It's interesting. Like Jeff Goodman was talking about it, and whether or not, because Sankey ruffled some feathers this week on that, where it's like there might just be their own tournament where the March Madness might change.
They love doing that. They love threatening that too.
That's a bad. Like, that's one where I think you could probably sell people on college football splitting off the playoff in that way. March Madness is one. Just why touch that one? I
If
don't.
if you did it, I mean, you would have, like, you just adjust your expectations of what Cinderella is. Like
Yeah.
Cinderella would be Oregon State,
Yeah.
or somebody who wasn't particularly good that year and then makes a run.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not the same thing. It's not like St. Peter's beating Kentucky.
Yeah.
Like, the nation was captivated by St. Peter's beating Kentucky. And in football, you're not going to have that. Like, a St. Peter's level school would have no shot against the football version of Kentucky, which isn't actually Kentucky. But a St. Peter's level school would get smashed by Kentucky football as well. So, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it. But we're talking about, them playing Alabama or Ohio State, that sort of team. It's not the same thing, because in basketball, if you got five guys who've played together for a while, or like the Butler scenario in 2010, like when
Mm-hmm.
Butler played Duke for the national championship, the best player on the floor was playing for Butler. It was Gordon Hayward.
Mm-hmm.
So you're never going to have that in football, where,
Right.
and even if you have the best player on the field, if the other team has the next 15 best, you're still going to lose.
Yeah, and that was like a really uncomfortable conversation where it's like you root on the Cincinnati situation. They did everything they were supposed to do to get there, but there was no one who thought that they could run the gauntlet, that you could beat Georgia then Alabama, or Alabama then Georgia. Like that was
Right.
never a possibility. But you have to like you don't want to poo poo what they did and things like that. But that is part of it, where it's like, yeah, you're along for the ride and you're kind of in the group. But football is different. You're not running that kind of gauntlet. You just don't have the players. You don't have the pieces.
No, but if they can get in there and like I said, win a first round game,
Yeah.
win a quarterfinal, like that's enough. That's enough
Mm-hmm.
to make that an incredibly popular postseason event. And it also keeps their regular season interesting to all of us,
Mm-hmm.
not just to their fans, but to all of us. And I think, again, there's value in that. There's value in that for non-conference games. If you're the Big Ten or the SEC, there's value in that for those leagues, obviously, for their regular seasons. And there's value in that for the postseason. And it allows college football to be a more national proposition and cover the whole country. Because you can say, okay, the Big Ten's a national conference now because it goes from Piscataway to Los Angeles. But I mean, that's a pretty big gap between Lincoln, Nebraska, and LA.
Mm-hmm.
The Pacific Northwest is a pretty heavily populated area that isn't included there. You know, the rest of Northern California is a massive population area that's not included there. So I do think that it would be good for the game if they were to come up with a postseason format that doesn't forget all those people, that remembers they're there, gives them some value, assigns them some value. And that keeps everybody more interested because, again, that's going to bring more viewers to Texas, Georgia,
Mm-hmm.
or USC, Michigan State, or any of those big blockbuster matchups that the SEC and Big Ten are moving to create.
But do you think that's ultimately what happens? Do you think they do get the invite to the party and that's still where we're headed? That will be the way things go? Or do you think it...
I don't know. I don't know. It's a weird chicken egg situation too, because they haven't decided on a playoff format yet.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't know what the league alignments are going to look like. So what are you going to do? You're going to figure out your league alignments first and then your playoff format?
What would you
Because you
do?
don't have, I would want I would want to know what the league alignments were before I made the playoff format. But I don't know if you can do that because they have to have a format.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say within the next year, because they got to start booking stuff.
Yeah.
Like you don't want like some plumbers convention to come in and book New Orleans and every hotel room in New Orleans and you can't have the game there or wherever it is you want to have where you want to play it. So they've got to figure all that stuff out. And the first time they're meeting about that, I believe, is next month. So I don't know that they're going to have any more definitive answers about who's going to be where by then.
What does your gut tell you? Is it 4 conferences left standing at the end of this? Do you think there's no way that all 5 are around this time next year? Like, where do you think it ultimately goes? If your gut feeling.
I think you could have all 5.
Mm-hmm.
It just may look different. And one may not feel the same.
The Pac-12 being the most likely.
That's what I would think. I would think if you're going to, like, if it's Pac-12, Big 12, and one's going to take from the other, logically, it feels like the Big 12 would be able to take from the Pac-12. It's got a stronger middle. It also doesn't have to care whether Oregon and Washington stay for a long time. I think because of the history together, the members of the Pac-12, the remaining members, are going to look at Oregon and Washington and say, okay, you got to give us a long-term commitment. And Oregon and Washington are going to be like, but we're waiting on the Big Ten to see if they want us. Because it's legitimate that they would be considered for the Big Ten. Like they'd be great candidates if the Big Ten decided to expand further, and especially if they wanted to go further out west. So, I would think if you did anything like that, the Big 12 would be the one who absorbed that. And then if you're the remaining Pac-12 schools, you would probably take from the Mountain West. And then you're still the Pac-12, but are you the same?
Yeah.
Probably not.
You're kind of like what the Big 12 is, or what they looked like they were going to be post Texas and Oklahoma.
But I would argue if the Big 12 can get the best of what the Pac-12 has left, that's a really good league. I already thought that the new Big 12, when Texas and Oklahoma lead, was going to be one of the most fun leagues to watch because you would have gone into most seasons where that's a 12-team league. Sometimes people are up, people are down, but like 8 to 9 teams would probably walk into every season with a legitimate chance to win the conference title, which would make some great games.
Sunbelt's my jam. They just got to protect
I
my
love the
Sunbelt
Sun Belt.
football.
Well, and the Sun Belt's a great
Yeah.
example of this. The Sun
Yeah.
Belt was the number 10 FBS conference. It was number 11 at one point when the WAC was still around. And they are now, what are they, number 7?
They're just so smart in the way they've built it and the way it's marketed, all of it. The Sun Belt's the perfect conference. I tell folks, unironically, I'm like, no, like Marshall App State was one of my favorite games last year. Like I love that game.
And the like you talk to the people at Coastal, they're terrified of Marshall coming into the league.
Yeah.
Because they know how good Marshall can be. And they've done a great job of picking programs that care deeply about football, even if they're not the biggest. Like Appalachian State and Georgia Southern, when they were FCS schools or 1AA or what, back in the day, they always cared deeply about football. They always drew crowds. Like that's what you want at that level. That's how you succeed.
That's part of like why the relegation aspect of all of this is so intriguing to me as a Premier League.
It's never going to happen, but it would be amazing.
Wouldn't it actually be like if there was ever a sport or some kind of league in America to adopt that model, it's actually college football. So when I like started going through it and some buddies and I were talking about it, it's like that actually would be the best thing because that's ultimately kind of what happened with the teams like App State and Georgia Southern, where it's like they prove that they really care and they can get the crowds and they've won enough there where it's like we need a new challenge and they move up.
Or Utah and TCU on another level.
Right. That would actually be the best case scenario. That would be so much fun. It would make the end of season like. Can you imagine like a situation?
Yeah, like tie the Sun Belt. Now, you got the ACC and the Big 12, so it wouldn't work this way. But theoretically, you would have to tie one league to the other. So you tie the Sun Belt to the SEC and you tie the MAC to the Big 10. And like so, imagine Coastal and the Raging Cajuns are playing a game to decide who plays in the SEC next year.
Oh my god!
And then you've got Vandy and Missouri playing a game to decide who has to play in the Sun Belt next year. I mean, it would be incredible.
Yeah, that's must-see TV. What do you think? Like, what do you think ultimately happens next? Do you think someone moves to the Big Ten next? Do you think everything's quiet for a while across the board? What do you think is actually the next chess move?
The time frame I can't figure out because Notre Dame can take as much time as it wants. But I do think ultimately Notre Dame gets pushed into a league this time.
Is it because of the playoff?
Because of the playoff. I've always been the one who says Notre Dame should never join a league if they don't want to. But their feeling is if they feel like they're going to get nudged out of the playoff, they'll join a league. Yeah. And the money's pretty outrageous at this point. Like joining the Big Ten makes them more money than staying independent. So, but I don't know when they do that. I think if I'm them, I wait and see what the playoff discussion looks like because if I don't feel forced into it, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to stay independent. And so my guess is the next move is something with the Big 10, the Big 12 and the Pac-12. And like I said, I don't know what direction that goes. I don't know if it's a merger, but it feels like that's sort of the inflection point. That's where something's got to happen.
And do you think the ACC just hangs around because of the grant rights stuff for 10 years, that they're just around?
I don't know about it. See, I don't think it goes like that because I've read the grant rights. I understand.
Did you understand it? I don't get it.
Not entirely. I'm not a lawyer. But I do know it's very much tied to the TV contract.
Yeah.
And they want a new TV contract. And I know if you ask somebody at the conference office, they'll say, well, it would survive if we, the grant rights would survive if we ripped up our TV contract. To which I'd say, I've never been to law school, but I guarantee you I could find a bunch of lawyers who would say every word of this document is tied to that TV contract. And if that TV contract goes away, they're going to have a pretty compelling argument why it doesn't stand up anymore. So that puts the ACC in this, like, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. So unless you just get this monster TV deal that makes everybody happy, then it might let people go. And then you didn't solve the problem.
Man, I'm curious. I do wonder, like, it feels like whatever noted. So it seems like because you said they're going to have to make a move on the playoff before league alignment just being completely just understood, that tells me that like Notre Dame's probably the next chess piece, because like if the
Yeah,
playoff committee makes a thing where it's like you have to be in a conference or we're not putting you in our playoff, then it's like, all right, I guess we have to do it now. And then everything
exactly.
starts unfolding.
Yeah, and then the thing is, because I had asked somebody, well, what about the TV deal with the Big Ten? Because they actually need to get that thing hammered out here in the next few months because it
Mm-hmm.
starts next July. And I said, do they have to know if they're going to get Notre Dame or not? And um, based on the people that myself and my colleagues at the Athletic have talked to about this, they don't have to. Like they
Mm-hmm.
can make a contingency plan with the networks that they're bargaining with and say, okay, if we use this lineup, here's what it's going to look like money wise. If we add Notre Dame, here's what it looks like. If we add Notre Dame and somebody else, here's what it looks like. And then so they get that all agreed to. And if Notre Dame decides to join 2 years down the road, it just goes to that.
I'm also curious just how this affects the non-revenue sports, Andy. Like, it can't be a coincidence that all of this is just spinning out of control when Tennessee takes over all of college athletics, and it can't be when we become an everything school and Danny White arrives in the scene and Rise Glorious becomes a thing. Tennessee baseball become the villains of college baseball. They can't be beaten for months at a time.
until until when it actually matters.
That's
Till
neither
the
here
super
nor there.
regional.
That's neither here nor there. It's really, really hard to stay on top when we get everybody's A game. Like that's just how it is when you're.
Well, that especially the way they play.
I mean, it's an exciting brand of baseball that ratings show. Once Tennessee was eliminated, it was not as fun for a lot of folks. Nobody wanted to see the Ole Miss Rebels who just snuck in after a bad season run the gauntlet. No, they wanted to see Tennessee keep it moving. They wanted to see the Vitello show keep it moving. My man Drew Gilbert and
So
company.
it's
Yeah,
you're mentioning SEC baseball, which
yeah.
at this point is sort of tipping into revenue sport land. But
Mm.
here's my thing on the non-revenue sports, and this is going to sound really harsh, but I don't care.
Yikes! Can't do it, Andy. I can't do that
No,
take.
no, they funded them before all this money started coming in.
Mm-hmm.
If they would like to continue funding them, they will. If they care enough, they'll fund them. If they don't care
Yeah.
enough, they won't. And any AD who tells you, "Well, I just can't," no, you just don't care enough. And that's not
Hmm.
my fault. That's not your fault. That is that AD's fault for not caring enough.
Well, do you
Because
think?
if they cared, they'd fund it.
Well, do you think it will be a situation? I think it was Bud Elliott who brought this up, where it's like we're going to get to the point where it's going to be contracts for basketball and football, and then everything else becomes club. Do you think that's where we're headed?
I mean, that's kind of what it should be. Why
Hmm.
should football pay for another sport? What did
I don't
that
know.
other sport do for football?
Well, the betterment of the university, right? Like it's better for everybody.
Okay.
More
I
scholarships for
mean,
people. Free college for a
if
lot of people.
if only we could agree on this as a population of the United States of America. If only that wasn't like a major divisive issue
True.
in the United States of America about,
Mm.
somebody subsidizing somebody else.
Hmm.
Like that. And I would argue that most of the people who really like college football,
Mm.
not big fans of subsidies everywhere else.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I really enjoy everything, and just being at an everything school now, it's just I don't want to see that momentum
Well,
halted.
then find some people who want to fund it.
I think we're in good shape. We're
Yeah,
making some. I
I
think
don't think
White Danny's
Tennessee's
gonna. Yeah.
I don't think Tennessee's going to have a problem with that. I really don't. I think there's a lot of schools, especially in the Big Ten and the SEC, where even if you told them, okay, we've got to devote more of the football money to football,
Mm.
we're going to need somebody to help kick in and get this. They do it.
Hmm. I think so too. I wonder because a lot of these good programs. That's the difference in college baseball with Cal State Fullerton, the East Carolinas, the Southern Misses of the world. Like it's just different, and that's their big thing. And I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. I enjoy that. And I'm a big college baseball guy, I guess. Florida or Tennessee though? Who wins the SEC East next?
Ooh, that's a tough one because Georgia's going to be up there for a long time. That's
They are, but I I will say like with Georgia, this is not going to end well with Stetson. Like he's not finishing on top. Like, they're not going back to back. Saban did it one time, and it's going to end with a loss. And I'm not even sure it ends like they don't. My take is like
everybody's season ends with a loss.
I know, but this is why him coming back will never make
Except the
sense to
one
me.
team. Well, it's actually it's not basketball, so it's not really like that. You might end
Mm,
with a win in a game you consider meaningless, but
true.
but if Stetson Bennett doesn't win the national title, that doesn't mean it's a failure. Like,
I didn't say it was a failure. I just don't
can
think
we
like he
please
had the
admit this
storybook
guy might
ending.
be good? Like, is it possible he might be good?
He's extremely good. I'm here for it. Hey, Stetson's a good player. He is a really good player. But Stetson's also like, this is it. He's not getting drafted. It's not like there's life after football or football after this
Oh,
situation in
there's
Athens.
life after this.
There
That
is
man's
life
never
after
gonna have to
football.
buy a beer in the state of Georgia in the rest of his life.
Yeah. I mean, that's true. That's true. But I don't know. I think Georgia will be beatable. I think there will be scenarios where we still haven't seen Kirby utilize a 5-star quarterback yet. I imagine at some point that's going to come back to bite him. At some point, that's going to have to
I'm not
matter.
worried about that because they're going to begin utilizing them after Stetson leaves. And at some point, they're going to luck into somebody who's like generational. They're going to be even better. Like, that's the problem with Georgia. They are building a monster that is very difficult to deal with if you're Florida, if you're Tennessee, if you're Kentucky, if you're South Carolina. And now I would assume the next iteration of SEC scheduling doesn't include divisions. So then it becomes more, you see Alabama more often if you're Georgia. You see LSU more often if you're Georgia. You see Texas A&M more often if you're Georgia. And those are more comparable rosters. Now, Tennessee and Florida would like to have more comparable rosters, and they're working toward that. But it's
at least one of us is.
I think they're both working pretty hard. And I mean, neither of them are doing all that well compared to Georgia and Alabama.
It's early. I don't know, man. The Nico effect is in full, for lack of a better word, in effect right now.
Yeah. And then
number
if Nico,
5 and 247.
Yeah.
Right now.
Okay, that's great. You ever watch Joe Milton practice?
The Joe Milton stories. I've seen him on campus. Joe Milton, and you wrote about it. I tell some buddies about it where you saw it. It's incredible, right?
Somebody told me this, and I was like, oh, what are you talking? Somebody told me if you see him throw in practice, you will say this is the best quarterback I've ever seen in my life. And I did, and I was like, yep. and this was this spring, so I knew Hendon Hooker's the starter. I know how the story ends. Yeah. And that's the thing when you put all your eggs in the first 5-star quarterback that you signed, and they haven't actually signed him yet, but I'm assuming they will. The first 5-star quarterback that you've signed since 2003. And by the way, the last one didn't pan out. So that doesn't mean it's going to work. There's no guarantee of anything, but yeah, no, I mean, I think both schools feel like they're heading in that right direction. You know, Florida, they're excited about what Anthony Richardson can do. I don't know how good he's going to be. He certainly showed flashes at times last year, but he didn't stay healthy. And there was a reason that Dan Mullen didn't just switch to him. Now, Dan Mullen also had to be basically talked into switching to Dak Prescott at Mississippi State too. So that might be something to that.
But we danced around it though. Who do you think? Because I do agree with you in the broader sense where like Georgia is this Death Star where ultimately they are.
Let me put it this way. I don't think there's going to be an SEC East.
That's true.
The next time one of them is capable of beating Georgia.
I think Tennessee
in the standings.
I think Tennessee is capable of beating Georgia this year. I do.
They're going to stop them?
I think capable
or is this going to be an Oklahoma Texas Tech situation with Baker and Mahomes?
It's more like that, I would guess. The secondary in Knoxville is still not great. I'm still pretty concerned on that front, but I do think year 2 with Heupel and Hendon being as good as he has been, and with I'm curious to see what McCoy does out wide if they get anything out of him. He's a former 5-star, by all accounts, really good.
Multiple different schools. Yep.
Multiple different schools. So it's a gamble, but if that's a gamble that works. I mean, that's a big thing. Squirrel White, I cannot wait to see him play.
I am so excited about him. I told Josh Heupel this when I saw him in Destin. I said, whatever you can do to get that guy the ball. Yeah. Because I want guys named Squirrel and guys named Pork Chop to succeed. Like I want to follow a sport where guys named Squirrel and Pork Chop are famous.
And he's got like a locked and ready to go NIL situation because we have this squirrel around campus, this Oak Ridge squirrel. I forgot his
Yeah.
name, but he's always at all the games. I don't know if you've seen him before, but he's this guy. He brings around his pet squirrel and he's dressed up in Tennessee stuff and he walks around and he's on your neck. He went on my shoulder at one game. I think it was a South Carolina game this past fall. But yeah, no, it's locked and loaded. And he's just speedster, super talented kid that I think is of all the young receivers here in Knoxville, I think he's most likely to pop right away. But I don't know. I just think ultimately, do you know how many schools did not win 10 games in the Power Five who were in top 10 in scoring last year? Do you know how many?
Would that be one? Would that be
That'd be one.
Tennessee?
And it was Tennessee.
Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
they're top 10 again, I just the wins have to come somewhere. If the offense is that good, I do think they're just going to be in games. I mean, they were in the Alabama game late. Like that was a dogfight.
If they can beat Pitt,
yeah,
that town, when Florida comes to town,
oh, it's going to be insane.
It's going to feel like the roof's about to blow off. The
I'm
entire
sweating
city.
thinking about it right now, Andy.
Yeah.
Like I'll be in the building and the nervousness and just it's a coliseum. Being in Neyland, as you know, it's different. Like it is a different kind of feel, and the nerves before the game, during the game, after. You're a Florida guy, you know the Callaway situation and everything else,
Mhm.
where it doesn't matter how much better Tennessee should be than Florida.
Yeah.
That game has just been 20 years now
It's
of
torture. Yeah.
yes.
I was at the Dallas Baker slap game in
Mhm.
2004. If you'd have told me after that night, Tennessee will only win one more of these between now and 2021, I would have been like, you are insane. There's no way.
Yeah.
No way.
But we'll see. I mean, we'll see. When people ask me about Tennessee and where they're going, I'm like, let revisit after Florida. Let's revisit after Florida. Once we get
I think they're going to be super fun to watch. I have no worries about their offense and being productive. It's just a matter of, can they stop some people? Because if they can, they're going to be very competitive.
well, I think it's one of the two things where it's like everyone just wants to put like, oh, they're going 8-4. They'll just revenge the Pitt game and lose to who they're supposed to lose to and get to 8-4 and then go to the bowl. And
I
I'm like,
don't think it's that neat and clean.
that's what I'm saying. We're on the same
Yeah.
page because I'm like, I'm either saying that they either make a big jump where you're like, oh God, they're 9-3, 10-2, where this offense is big time. Hendon Hooker is a Heisman candidate. Teams cannot deal with this firepower and everyone's a lot more comfortable. And the defense is a little bit better. And they get some third down stops they were not getting last year. The pass rush is a little bit better. But I do. I think that's where it goes, or it goes a step back, where people pick up on the tempo and Heupel has to adjust, and maybe injuries play a role. And Hendon Hooker, who took a lot of shots last year, that's a possibility of keeping him upright because that guy, he is so good with his legs, but he takes some shots, and he's just
Yeah.
not built like Joe Milton. He's not built to take those kind of shots, so that's a
Yeah.
concern.
He's tough as nails. He usually
Mhm.
gets up. There are times when he couldn't, but yeah, I'm really excited to see them play. There's a lot of teams in the SEC though that are tough out type teams that
Mhm.
can go beat one of the better teams. I mean, you look at Mississippi State. When's the last time Mike Leach had a third year starting quarterback?
Yeah.
It was Luke Falk the year before the Gardner Minshew year, and I think they won 9 games. Graham Harrell was in his third year as a starter in that year where they won 11.
Mhm.
Cliff Kingsbury was in his third year as a starter in their first like really good season at Texas Tech. So that hasn't happened very often, and they're a very old team, and I think that matters. I mean, you look at like Oklahoma State's defense last year, how good they were despite not having a ton of NFL guys. Was because their average age was like 23.
Yeah.
They were just old.
Yeah.
And so I think you've got that. You've got Brian Kelly at LSU, where there's always talent at LSU. And now you've got a guy there who has won at every level. So
Mhm.
that'll be interesting. Arkansas has been really good since Sam Pittman showed up. And then Texas A&M, you think, okay, if they ever get the quarterback situation right, they're going to be maybe on Georgia, Alabama level. And so you got
And
that.
they
And
kind
then,
of
of
were 2
course,
years ago. People just
yeah,
forget the 2020 year,
yeah, they were
unfortunately, is
really good.
forgotten for A&M, which
Yeah.
sucks for them because people are like, "Oh, what has Jimbo done?" It's like a normal year. That 2020 team showed that they were probably they were maybe one of the 4 best teams in college football. Like he's kind of proven it. That team is just going to be lost to history.
Yeah, but it was really good. Fourth year starting quarterback in Kellen Mond.
Yeah.
So not coincidence. Very good offensive line. if they do, like if Max Johnson wins the job and turns out to be awesome, you're talking about them maybe competing with Alabama. And look, this Alabama team is going to be really good. They're maybe the best offensive player in the country, definitely the best defensive player in the country. It's going to be tough to deal with them. But then on the East side, like Kentucky's going to be really good again this year. I without Wandale Robinson, I do wonder, do they have to work a little harder to score points? But I'm a believer in the way Mark Stoops builds a team. He's just done really well at that over the years. And then South Carolina is a tricky one. They overachieved last year. They've got Spencer Rattler now starting at quarterback, which, I mean, if I told you that this time last year, Spencer Rattler will be South Carolina's starting quarterback going into the 22 season, you would have had me committed. So this is all going to be fascinating to see. I mean, we kind of danced around Florida a little bit. I don't know what Florida's going to be.
Yeah, they're the wild card in the East.
Yeah, the roster probably isn't up to snuff to win in the East or to win the East. But if Richardson turns out to be really good, that makes up for a lot. And then they become a team that can beat people they're not supposed to beat.
Yeah. We'll end on this, Andy. Who finishes last in the SEC West? This is my favorite part of all this because someone has to have a season from hell.
Yeah.
People just pencil in 6-6 for all these or 7-5. I'm like, that's not happening. Someone's going 3-9, 4-8.
Well, the one that I can't figure out is Ole Miss because it's almost a completely different team, but that doesn't mean it's going to be a bad team. But it's almost easier to pick them to finish last because you kind of know what Arkansas is and you kind of know what Mississippi State is. Although I think who I might go with, and because we kind of know where this is headed, whether they finish last in the West or not. So their fans are not going to be super mad at me if I say this because they're like, well, whatever. Auburn.
Yeah.
I mean, their recruiting is what you'd expect if you had a coach who wasn't a particularly elite recruiter anyway, and then you tried to stab him in the back. So I think I'll go with them because it doesn't feel like there's a lot to be excited about right now.
It's just rare. Auburn, it doesn't happen. Like they don't go 4-8. And if you look at their history of the last 30, it doesn't happen. So it's like,
well, it does happen. I mean, Gene Chiswick's last year, they went 0-8
they
in the
immediately
SEC.
adjust. Yeah. It's pretty rare.
Exactly.
Though. Like it's just, it's not and they make a quick correction. They're like, that's not Auburn football. We're over.
Oh,
like,
and that's the thing. I'm not worried about them long-term. Like they will be good again very soon, but they have poisoned the well with this particular situation. And they just need to let it play out and then move on.
I could see it like LSU. I don't think would shock me at all, where it's just kind of a rude awakening where you're kind of having to get things right. When you have 3 quarterbacks where they might play 3 different quarterbacks and they are just the musical chairs on that front. I don't know. I mean, it's a possibility. Jackson Dart might be bad.
I don't think the LSU awakening is going to go that direction. I think it might go the other direction where it's like, oh crap, LSU has a really good roster still.
Well, I mean, the last 3 coaches have won national titles. It's a good spot to be in. It's a good spot to be in. Brian Kelly was like, yeah, I'll go ahead and do that. Yeah. Andy Staples, we can read you, theathletic.com. Go subscribe if you're not already, Monday through Friday on The Athletic for your podcast, The Andy Staples Show. Anything else you'd like to plug as we wrap up here on a Tuesday night?
No, I think that's it. That's all. That's all I do.
Well, you've given me so much of your time tonight. I greatly appreciate it, Andy. Have a great rest of your week. Get ready for SEC Media Days next week. Should be fun.
Yeah, I am set. I will be in Atlanta, and first time I've been since 2019. So I'm ready to go.
Traffic's still there as a longtime Atlanta guy.
Listen, I'm actually renting a car, driving to the airport, Ubering from the rental car center to the hotel, and I do not intend to get in a car again unless it's for food.
Okay, you get it. Yeah, that's how you got to do it. Traffic. It's unlike anything else. Andy Staples, thank you so much, and we'll have to check back in again soon.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it.